Today I have for you The Language of Thorns, Midnight Tales and Dangerous Magic by the amazingly talented Leigh Bardugo. First of all, let's talk about the way this book looks. I think the camera is picking up the reflective nature of like the orangey gold bronzy stuff. The cover is really, it actually kind of gives off like the old school book vibes of like cloth almost and like linen. I don't know if you can see that, but that's kind of the vibe that it gives off. This book is two-tone color. The book itself is also gorgeous. On the inside it is like a teal and then like a burgundy plummy kind of color, and on the back here it says love speaks in flowers, truth requires thorns. And this book was really easy to read and is set up really interestingly. So first, it takes place in Grishaverse. Do you have to have read Six of Crows or the Shadow and Bone trilogy to understand the stories? No, there are some references that fans of Grishaverse will recognize, from countries and cities mentioned to beverages and things like that are mentioned. So no, you don't have to have already been part of Grishaverse to read this. This book, the focus is on like old-fashioned storytelling, and the old like stories, you know, from the Grimm brothers, like fairy tales were really dark. They're not like the Disney versions, and this kind of takes those fairy tales and adds a like twist to them that's usually dark and often sinister. And Leigh actually acknowledges that in her author's note about like what inspired her. So we have several stories, and it tells us the country of origin. We have Zemini, which is Ayama and the Thornwood. Ravkin is the Too Clever Fox, which it does not have to do with Nikolai or Stormhunt. I mean, that may be where he got his name, but he's not in the story. The Witch of Duva and Little Knife. Kirch is the Soldier Prince. Fergin is When Water Sang Fire. And the way the illustrations work is actually very cool. So this happens to be a blue, or a red page. But what happens is there will start with, like, here you have a little castle. And what happens is the way the illustrations work is they kind of build. So then the castle expands, and then a labyrinth starts underneath the castle. And what happens is, and then often the next page will be incorporated. And how it works is each of the stories, once these images converge, it's pretty much like the end of the story, and then there will be a full page illustration. That said, so here is a full page illustration with the teal and the burgundy. With that said, there was one exception to that, and that was the story at the end, When Water Sang Fire, because it was a little bit longer, so the images converged, then it like restarted with a new image, and then the second image converged. So that one is the only one that doesn't do that. And what actually made this really fun and kind of interactive was looking to see what illustration was added to expand the original illustration, because sometimes it was really obvious and then other times it was really subtle, and then sometimes it had to do with what was happening on those pages. So it was really amazing. The artist on this is Sarah Kippen, and it says her style is inspired by early animation and romantic paintings, and she did a fabulous job. I mean, like, really, it's really amazing. One of my favorites was I think it's called The Little Prince. Okay, so I already mentioned that these are like dark stories, but what I want to add is, like, it's really hard to choose a favorite. So I was trying to think about it when I wrote my Goodreads review, and I would say my least favorite story, because it was easier to think of what was my least favorite, was The Too Clever Fox, and that's only because I'm an animal lover, and so I didn't really like it that much. I mean, it was okay. But I was trying to think of my favorites, and I think my favorites are probably The Witch of Duva, which is kind of a morbid twist on Hansel and Gretel. The Soldier Prince, which involves like a cross between the Nutcracker and the Velveteen rabbit. and when water sang fire because it had mermaids in it, and it was just really like interesting, and like sad at the same time, but like I don't know, it was just a really cool story. It was about it had like Little Mermaid vibes, but then like kind of not, and it had like witches in it and stuff. It was really cool. I also liked Ayama and the Thornwood, which was the first story in the book, just because it was really interesting and had really strong storytelling, and you know, it had like stories within the story, so that was kind of interesting. But overall, like, this book is really unlike anything I've ever read before, and this is from the Witch of Duva, and it really just makes, it's kind of like Harry Potter and all the supplementary books, like how Hogwarts textbooks kind of start, you know, surfacing, and it just makes that world that much more, I don't know if immersible is a word, but like, you know, it makes it that much more real. And I feel like that's what these stories do, is they make the Grishaverse, which we know is not the end, because Leigh Bardugo also announced at the beginning of last week that Nikolai is finally getting his own story. Nikolai is from Shadow and Bone trilogy, and it's called The King of Scars. So hello, there's a lot of excitement over that. So the Grishaverse is expanding, if anything. So there's planning on more stories. I do know, and in the back of this book it mentions it, and I kind of remembered that I guess Leigh Bardugo signed on for some adult fiction involving, which I was wondering if it's adult or new adult, because the protagonist is 20, and at least traditionally speaking, the age of the protagonist really dictates the genre of the book. But and it has to do with like secret societies and Yale, and Leigh Bardugo is a Yale alum. So, and like, you know, like the occult kind of. So that's called The Ninth House, and I didn't see a release date for that, but that's obviously not part, I mean, it's got supernatural, but it's obviously not part of Grishaverse. But King of Stars is supposed to come out in 2019, so that's kind of far away, because we're talking like a year and like 4 months or something. A year and 2 months. Why did I say 4 months? I mean, it could be 4 months depending on when it comes out. But anyway, so the language of Thorns, if you're expecting it to be like Six of Crows, or if you're expecting it to be like Shadow and Bone, it is not. It is storytelling. Lots of description and just the way the language flows. Like, I would not read these to my kids because I'd probably scar them for life if I had kids. But they're meant, I think, to be read aloud. They lend to a lot of creativity. I could see a lot of, you know, if you're an artist who, like, you know, a drawing artist of some kind, I could see a lot of imagery really working well for that. I myself enjoyed the imagery in the two-tone ink in this book because it's something that's so different, that we do see a lot more in YA, that experimentation of, you know, splayed pages, or using, I said splayed, I think I meant sprayed pages, or using like different colors, you know, ink or whatever. I've seen a few books like that, and I think it's just really fun. I wish that some of those options would open up to people who self-publish. We're pretty limited, especially when it comes to hardback. We only get like 2 linen options, and that's pretty much it. And then black's not even one. It's like blue and gray. Like, how is black not an option? But anyway, so hopefully maybe as more of this becomes the norm in YA, perhaps some of the self-publishing platforms will pick up on the demand for that. Maybe it would increase costs, but I don't know, I think it'd be worth it. So this book not only is visually stunning, but it is full of wonderful, magical, dark and twisted stories that if you like Grishaverse, you will enjoy. If you are not part of the Grishaverse, you may want to, this would not spoil you, so maybe if you just want to check out what the culture is like in Leigh's style of writing, then this would be a great starting point for you. I gave this book 5 stars because, like I said, it was even hard to choose a favorite story out of here because they're all really amazing for different reasons. So this is The Language of Thorns, and then meanwhile, happy reading.